Welcome to the 6th episode of All the World, Proven Conspiracies in History. To find out about the conspiracy of the pages in 327 BCE, one must first journey to the edges of known history towards the brutal, wind-swept fortress of Bactra in what is now northern Afghanistan. Late 327 BCE, the Macedonian camp was steeped in poison. The army had been marching for 7 years. They had defeated everything including the Hellespont and Hindu Kush, but the further into Asia they ventured, the more their king, Alexander the Great, transformed. His was no longer the accessible Macedonian warrior, king who ate the same bread and slept in the same mud as his men. He was emerging as the great king, as lord of Asia, framed in purple robes enveloped in Persian eunuchs. He would start to insist on proskynces, the Persian form of prostration or bowing to the king, as if the king were a god. To the free-born Macedonians and Greeks, this was blasphemy and slavery. It was in this forge of cultural hostility and bodily fatigue that a plot was born, not among the conquered Persians or the dissatisfied generals, but among the sons of the Macedonian aristocrats, the royal pages. At the center was Alexander, now 30, paranoid, alcoholic, and brilliant, obsessed with bringing together the Greek and Persian spheres. Against him was a ghost of a man, Callisthenes of Olynthus. Callisthenes was the court historian. He is Aristotle's nephew. He embodied the intellectual conscience of the expedition. He had been carried to chronicle Alexander's achievements, but with him was the biggest critic of Alexander's Orientalism there ever had been. He refused to bow. He taught the youth the virtues of tyrannicide, the killing of dictators, and listening to him was the ringleader of the conspiracy, a teenage boy named Hermolaus. Hermolaus was a royal page, a son of the nobility, and training to become an officer. He was proud, very smart, consumed in a rage that would eventually destroy him and his friends. I am Tsar, teaching the common man famous conspiracies of our history. If you like my content, kindly like, subscribe, and comment. The conspiracy dated back to the spring of 327 BC, a time of lull before the invasion of India. The assassination was committed during the darkest hour of night, the so-called second watch. Victims were to include Alexander himself, including anyone in the way of the boy's blades. The plotters are the royal pages themselves, Hermolaus and his lover Sostratos, in line with a small circle of 5 or 6 other boys from the highest families in Macedonia, including Antipater, Asclepiodorus, and Philotas, not the general, but a page. These were the next generation of boys for the empire. They waited on the king at his table, guarded his bedroom door, and watched his horses, and they were the only people in the world who would be able to get close to Alexander while he slept without being searched. Who plotted it? It was a conspiracy of children, if anything young men before adulthood. It was funded not by Persian gold or bribed by Spartan agents. It was a crime of passion which developed into a political assassination. The motive was singular and brutal humiliation. The inciting incident took place during a royal boar hunt. Alexander enjoyed hunting. It was the art of kings, a game of war. A huge wild boar charged at the king during the hunt. Before Alexander could strike the deadly blow, the young Hermolaus threw his javelin and killed the beast. In the eyes of a modern man, the king was a saved man. To Alexander he'd stolen the glory of the kings. Drunkenly on his own godliness and furious, Alexander ordered the boy to be whipped in front of the other pages, and that his horse be taken away. This was a horrible punishment. In reality, for a Macedonian noble, physical whipping was a punishment reserved for slaves. By whipping him, Alexander had socially murdered Hermolaus. Hermolaus did not weep, he planned. He took great pains to tell Sostratos, his lover, and declared that he would not live with the shame any longer unless the man who made it was murdered. Only then would the man who had so tortuously branded him But the motive quickly deepened. Hermolaus studied under Callisthenes. He started to articulate his personal grievance in political philosophy. He informed the boys that Alexander was no longer a king, but a tyrant. He mentioned the murder of Cletus the Black, who Alexander had killed in a drunken rage last year, the execution of Parmenion, and the wearing of Persian clothing. He said killing Alexander was not just vengeance, it was an obligation to freedom. The boys, impressionable and fierce, promised a deal. They chose to strike one night when it was Antipater's turn to guard the royal bedchamber. They would let the others in, approach the sleeping king, and hack him to death in his bed. The plan was carried out, on paper, perfectly. The boys had the access, the weapons, the plan. They were the guards, so they understood the rotation of the guards. The conspirators assembled on the night of their appointment. They were terrified but determined. They took position at the entrance of the royal tent. They were waiting for the king to get home from his drinking party, the symposium that he held nearly every night. They waited for the lights to go out. They wore their daggers under their cloaks, but then fate or Alexander's odd habits intervened. While Alexander was walking out of the drinking party to go to bed, a Syrian soothsayer, a woman who had followed the camp and was known to Alexander as someone he respected, intercepted his journey. She seemed possessed. She advised him not to go to sleep, but go back and drink until morning. Alexander, deeply superstitious, and perhaps seeking an excuse to continue partying, laughed and said yes. Finally he turned around and went to the wine. The boys waited all night. The sun came up. The watch changed. Alexander never came to bed. The opportunity was lost. A failure of perfect execution meant that the conspiracy fell apart. The following day the boys attempted to reconvene, yet the psychological toll of regicide is enormous. One of the conspirators was a boy named Epimenes, not meeting the king, but his friend Eurylochus, who didn't join the plot, to tell Eurylochus what he saw. He boasted of what the plan had been doing. He might have been trying to recruit him into it. Maybe he was simply freeing his soul. Eurylochus was horrified. He quickly went to Ptolemy, one of Alexander's bodyguards, and the future king of Egypt. Ptolemy ran to Alexander's tent. Alexander was sleeping off the hangover, and roused him. He revealed the names. For the witnesses and the conspirators, the result was quick and gruesome. Alexander had all the boys arrested. They were stripped of their status and tortured. The Macedonian torture tactics were no subtle matter. The rack, the fire, the whip. In the hurt the boys finally confessed to the plot, but, and this is vital, they denied at first that anyone else was involved. But Alexander required a new target. He hated the philosopher Callisthenes. He despised his arrogance, his unwillingness to bow, and his sway over the young in life. He asked the boys, "Who told you to do this?" Eventually, probably under extreme duress, some of the boys implicated Callisthenes, saying he had told them that the only way to become famous is to kill a famous man. It was a trial before the Macedonian army assembly, as was the custom. Alexander drew the boys out in chains. Their own comrades stoned them to death. It was a ritual purging, a way for the army to wash its hands of treason. But his true horror was reserved for Callisthenes, not a boy, a Greek citizen famous in all his glory as an intellectual. Alexander could not simply stone him away. Different accounts abound about his death, and that further creates mystery. Some say he was thrown into a cage and dragged with the army until he died of disease and filth, his body covered with lice. Others report that he was racked and then hanged. Some accounts claim he received poison. Whatever the approach, the result was the same. The mind of the expedition was suppressed. The reason this event is so essential in history is that it signals the end of the Macedonian phase of Alexander's reign, and to be sure, the start of his total tyranny. Although this wasn't the case before the conspiracy of the pages, there was this pretense of camaraderie and the king as the first among equals. After the plot, Alexander trusted no one. He saw daggers in the eyes of his friends' children. he started cleansing the old Macedonian nobility and promoting Persians and men who owed their status solely to him. The empire's free speech had died. No one dared to criticize the king's dress or his manners any more, as he witnessed the fate of the historian who spoke his mind. The geopolitical motivations and changes in geopolitics after the event were glaring. Alexander pushed much further into India, perhaps in order to flee the echoes of his actions. The way Alexander went about his new conquests expanded more ruthless than ever. He initiated a series of campaigns of murder in cities that opposed him with their own brutal destruction. The conspiracy also further established the rift between the old guard, like Craterus and Polyperchon, and the new men, like Hephaestion. It also sent a chill through the Greek world at home. Aristotle, the uncle of Callisthenes and former tutor for Alexander, turned against his pupil. Aristotle would never admit that he forgave Alexander for murdering his nephew, and 4 years later rumors were circulating about how Aristotle had actually sent the poison to kill Alexander in Babylon. The physical facts today that confirm this story are in the disaggregated histories of those present. We have the records of Ptolemy and Aristobulus that remain in the writings of Arrian and Curtius Rufus. We know the names of the boys. We know the location, Bactra. We possess the writings of Callisthenes himself, preserved in shards illustrating his strong opposition to tyranny, but perhaps the most haunting or physical fact is the change in the coinage and art of the time period. After 327 BC, the images of Alexander underwent shift. He grows more god-like, more removed. The horns of Ammon appear. The diadem of the Persian kings appears. The conspiracy of the pages was the moment the human Alexander died, killed not by the boy's daggers, but by his own reaction to them, and the monster, the divine, untouchable, terrified tyrant, was born. The boys failed to kill the man, but they successfully killed the soul of his kingship. I hope you have enjoyed my contents as we explore the world's most bizarre and hidden conspiracies. Your love by liking, sharing, and subscribing means a lot to me, and your comments are always welcome. See you in the next episode of the World of Conspiracies. Thanks for watching.